patient. And it was a perfectly reasonable thing to give psilocybin or LSD or mescaline or anything to a graduate student if he wrote up a good report, This is good experiential learning. Why not? No controversy at all in those days. So anyway, I became known in the clinic as that interesting American student who had the mystical experience. And this was before Set and Setting was discovered really in Germany, though they knew about it in Canada and in Boston, actually. But boy, the rest of my life is kind of footnotes to that day. And we're still going strong, and welcome aboard, everyone.
Yeah, well, so really started with the experiential, which obviously a lot of people have to find a way to get that on their own. But yeah, how important do you see that as being, and what pathways do you see to provide that for people who want to work with psychedelics nowadays?
Well, nowadays you can go to Jamaica. It's not that they legalized it in Jamaica, they just never made it illegal. And the mushrooms keep growing. It's perfectly okay to use them. You can go to Brazil or places in South America or Holland. But I think it's important to acknowledge that the experiences really aren't in the drug. They're in the human mind, as I see it. And there are many non-drug practices in meditation and sensory overload and sensory deprivation and natural childbirth and whatever that can also trigger these profound states of stages in enlightenment, in gradually waking up to the fact that we really are more than we think we are. Karl Jaspers was my hero throughout graduate school, German existentialist, many of you may know. And he says over and over and over in his far too many books that man is more than he knows or ever can know of himself. And after a profound psychedelic experience, you know that that's literally true, that we're much more than egos with our proper names going through our daily routines. And that's where this whole field opens up into spirituality and comparative religions and whatever, which is a fascinating realm.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's just reflecting on that expansive experience of being more than you thought you were, and then coming back to this state of consciousness, to whatever your ordinary state of consciousness might be. How do you support people in that? Like, what are some of your thoughts on supporting people kind of in that dramatic and relatively quick back and forth between those states?
Yeah, well, I have had the honor of being with several hundred people as they've undergone what we call death and rebirth, or awakening to transcendence, going beyond the ego and then coming back to it again, which is central in really all the major world religions as kind of the ultimate form of revelation or spiritual awakening. And I've seen it happen in so many different people of all different backgrounds and belief systems. Good atheists can have profound spiritual experiences. you know. What counts is not the tenets of your belief system. What counts, I believe, is your ability to be grounded in a good relationship and to choose to entrust yourself to the deeper levels of your own mind and to receive whatever emerges, to trust the entelechy, the meaningful choreography of your own mind as it leads you through the process of personal and perhaps spiritual development. And even the patient who thinks he or she is all screwed up has an incredibly wise, deeper self, or whatever you want to call it. And as therapists doing psychedelic therapy, we trust that deeper wisdom in the person. And it comes through just fine. Yeah.
Yeah, I think as you're talking there, what really stands out is your optimism and your trust in people to have their own experiences. And
That's right.
Yeah.
I confess I do suffer from optimism, but but I think it's well based. I've seen an awful lot of suffering and serious suicidal ideation and all that stuff vanquish with effective psychedelic therapy. And I think there are reasons to be optimistic. This is so much more than just giving a medication. This is back to the days where medicine and religion were working together, you know? In our culture, they become separate taboo worlds, you know? But I think they need to get together to deal with the psychedelic frontier.
Yeah, on that note, could you talk a little bit about some of the overlaps and linkages between therapeutic and spiritual applications of psychedelics?
Well, let's acknowledge, first of all, I think most of you know this, that there's no such thing as the psychedelic experience. Okay. There are many strata, varieties of experiences, you know, from changes in perception and sensory experience into psycholytic therapy of reliving childhood traumas and working out developmental dynamics in our childhoods, Jung's personal unconscious. And that's very valuable terrain, you know? And then there's paranoid, panic, confused states that frankly don't occur when you're well prepared. That goes with fighting for control and being scared, not understanding how to navigate in these inner worlds, you know. But then there's these states beyond the everyday personality that people discover, the symbolic archetypal realms of gods and goddesses and precious gemstones and ancient civilizations and you name it. And people see this stuff with their eyes closed. Where does that come from? Anyone know? You know, is it encoded in our genes? Is it spiritually accessed? But it happens very reliably in many people during their psychedelic sessions. And it's awesome and it's beautiful and it's multidimensional for many people. And then beyond that is this unitive state we call mystical consciousness, which is now, believe it or not, an accepted scientific term. Has nothing to do with fortune tellers wearing turbans, okay? Mystical consciousness is a unitive state that happens, it's hard to put into words. It happens when the ego is transcended, and in a way, you're not even there when it happens. And yet, when the ego reconstitutes itself, the memory is there. And you can remember this eternal state outside of time, of incredible beauty, with all kinds of intuitive insights that seem to hold up over different people in different cultures. Pretty impressive stuff. Mm-hmm. And I am happy to notice that the religious scholarship community is finally beginning to awaken to the psychedelic frontier. It doesn't have to be the exclusive domain of medicine and psychological treatment. It also has profound relevance for religion and for education and for experiential learning if we use these drugs wisely. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you have such beautiful ways of describing some of this, and I think to even capture some of that language, you have to get beyond psychotherapy, right? So it's poetic language of spirituality is helpful. Yeah.
At Hopkins, we had in our treatment room, we had a small statue of a Buddha. And one of my colleagues, after a while, wanted to take the Buddha out of the room when he ran a session for fear it would suggest religious content, and that's fine. I have no objection to removing the statue of the Buddha. But I really think the Buddha is simply the one who woke up. And in that framework, there's a Buddha within each of us. It's simply there, and you can be a good agnostic and still awaken to these states that we usually call spiritual. And the remarkable thing about them is not only that they're so awesome and inspiring and feel more real than the state of consciousness we're in right now, but that they have what William James called fruits for life, that afterwards there's a therapeutic punch, if you will, for many people. Sometimes it takes some work to integrate it, but new intuitive knowledge, new perspectives on who you are and who other people are and what the nature of reality might be, a feeling of connectedness with others, of being part of the family of man or the net of Indra. And if you think you're alone and isolated and without inner resources, you're deluded. You're estranged from transcendence. You've fallen asleep, okay? So there's the therapeutic value that when someone has or is had by, if you will, a mystical state of consciousness, you can't pretend to be worthless anymore, no matter how many jobs you've lost and relationships that have collapsed, And that's pretty powerful therapeutically. Mm-hmm. There is beauty and wisdom within each of us. Who'd have thunk? Yeah.
And so some of your, you've participated in a lot of really interesting research, but you've been thinking here about research with religious leaders and maybe people in training to become religious leaders. I wonder if you could talk a little bit about that here.
Sure, I'd be happy to.
Yeah.
Actually, that study, which finished 4 years ago or so, still isn't published, but hopefully it soon will be released. There's committees at Hopkins that are reviewing it for unknown reasons. But yeah, Tony Bossis in New York and I were able to do this study with professional religious leaders from all different world religions. And we gave them, each of them, 2 high-dose psilocybin sessions under ideal circumstances, about 2/3 in Baltimore and 1/3 in New York. And to the best of my knowledge, everyone valued their experiences incredibly and found them very helpful, both on a professional level and a personal level. And these were rabbis and imam and people from all different Christian denominations, from Eastern Orthodox and Roman Catholic to Pentecostal, Baptist, you know. An interesting part of this is that we bent over backwards trying to protect everyone's confidentiality. And now just about every one of them has jumped up and down in the public eye and told the world, I was part of the Hopkins study with religious professionals. And they've connected with one another. And many of them are very public now and providing leadership in the religious community regarding psychedelics. Hunt Priest, a Episcopalian, has formed ligari.org. If you don't know it, you can check it out, which is building bridges between institutional Christianity and the psychedelic frontier. Zach Kamenetz in San Francisco, a rabbi, is doing the same thing with Judaism and the psychedelic frontier. Our imam is about to get into some leadership in that area, I think. People like Jamie Clark Souls, you can look her up on the web if you like. She's a fully tenured professor of New Testament at Perkins School of Theology in Dallas, is highly respected as a expert in the Gospel of John and so on. And she is writing one very well-composed essay after the other on the importance of psychedelics in the religious life, you know. And wow, welcome to the club, religious community, you know. In fact, especially with MDMA being put on hold right now medically, I wonder if there will be much more movement in terms of the religious use of these substances. There are ayahuasca groups opening up all over that are fully legal, and it's just interesting to see how this will develop. I'm fond of saying that remember, psychedelics aren't new. They've probably been around since the dawn of civilization, certainly 500 BC or so. And they've emerged and been repressed many times in many different cultures. And right now they're emerging in the early 21st century. And are we evolved enough Are we bright enough? Can we communicate respectfully enough with people who don't understand what this is all about to really integrate psychedelics into our culture in medical, educational, and religious ways?
Mm.
I hope you'll all join me in that,
Mm. Yeah, we were talking a little bit before everyone got on about the FDA decision and how that might impact things. And I think your perspective, and you had to endure a couple decades of disruption of that research, and how were you able to persist with that?
Yeah, well, as you may know, actually, in around 1970, that's when the Maryland Psychiatric Research Center was first constructed. I don't know if you know that. I mean, this was a four-story building, essentially dedicated to psychedelic research, funded by the state of Maryland, with biochemical labs, animal labs, sensory isolation, tank and chamber, special suites for psychedelic therapy, with kitchenettes and private bathrooms, library, auditorium, everything you could wish for, and state-funded positions for all the professionals to staff the building, including myself at that time. It was really quite unbelievable. So here we were in this brand new facility, sitting around a big oak table, debating how we were going to train the hordes of therapists that would be needed in the next few years. That was 1970, when then Nixon said that Timothy Leary was the most dangerous man in America. And there were editorials appearing in the newspapers saying, why are we using Maryland taxpayer money to give people LSD? And finally, the entire center was transferred to the University of Maryland from the Department of Health and Mental Hygiene. And then the clinical sciences division that was doing the psychedelic research was completely eliminated. So the footnote there is that it's not the federal government that's decisively stopped psychedelic research. It was administrators at the university who decided this was just too controversial, and retreated. But I was the last to leave that place in 1977. I had the honor of giving psilocybin to a cancer patient, and that was the last session, and it became totally dormant. Then in the United States, my two little boys and I emptied out my office, and I thought that was the end of psychedelic research. And that was 77, and in 99, Roland Griffiths and I were able to restart things at Hopkins. And Rick Strassman did a little work in the early 90s with DMT. That was just the beginning of the rebirth of psychedelics. And I never would have dared to believe that it would be as broadly internationally active as it is right now. I wouldn't have expected that in my lifetime.
Yeah, I guess I don't know that kind of what the international space. You hear of a few countries where things were going on in the 60s and maybe early 70s, but kind of your view now of things internationally, how is it different, and what do you see when you look around the world with psychedelics?
Well, there's more going on than I can remember, which is a wonderful situation. Yeah, there's research going on in Israel. In Theracil in Canada is going full speed ahead trying to get legal clearance for end of life use with psilocybin. And boy, they're really well organized and they're working hard. And Australia, actually, MDMA is legal for post-traumatic stress disorder in Australia, and psilocybin is legal for depression. And they're moving strongly to get clearance for psilocybin at the end of life in Australia. That doesn't mean lots of people are receiving it yet. There's just the very first clinics getting authorized and coming into being, like Clarion Clinics in Melbourne. But Clarion Clinics is offering psychedelic therapy, and it's not in research anymore. This is pure treatment, you know? So keep tuned.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's
We got
important. It's important
help
context. Is yeah, yeah,
help these places get started really well, because all of a sudden Australia has permission, but that doesn't mean they have trained people to do it, you know? So we got to help educate the interested professionals so it gets health launched in healthy and productive ways.
Mhm.
But isn't it great to be there?
Yeah. It's hopeful as we had our own setback there with MDMA, right? So yeah.
But the tango, most of you have danced the tango, I hope. It's one step backwards and two steps forward, and one step backwards and two steps forwards. And that's progress. You move around the dance floor that way. And I still haven't quite figured out everything that contributed to the recent MDMA setback, but it's only a step backwards. And some people are very well intentioned, but they don't know what they don't know, you know? And we need to educate them patiently and carefully.
Yeah, thank you. You've alluded a few times to making sure the facilitators are prepared and optimal conditions. Could you say a little bit? I know there's a lot that could be said there, but just about I don't know, some of boiling down some of your favorite advice to help people
Yeah.
navigate a psychedelic experience.
Well, I specialize in the training of psychedelic therapists. Who'd have thunk? But very briefly, I believe effective therapy demands that therapists be authentic. And there's more than good way to do effective therapy. I think it has to be more than just applying what a manual tells you mechanically to do, you know? And every dyad of therapist and research volunteer or patient is unique. And if you only have 4 hours, say, to develop a very deep sense of trust, you have to really trust your intuition about how to relate with this particular person in a way that establishes so deep a trust that if under psilocybin the person is convinced he or she is dying or going crazy, that they can allow that to happen. That's a lot of trust. And the art of the therapist is to establish that profound sense of safety in a very brief period. Easier said than done. And if you can't establish it, then you don't give the drug. You say to the research director, with this person, I need 2 more hours, you know? But then once the safety, the relationship is well established, and it helps to do some mental imagery with eye shade and headphones in preparation too, by the way. Just get used to feeling safe when you can't see your therapist anymore, you know? But then there's also what we call psychoeducation, simple information, teaching about how to respond to the effects of a psychedelic. And it boils down really to three very basic principles in my book. One is if there's something frightening, to meet it as directly and quickly as you can. Don't try to escape from it unless you want to experience panic and paranoia, which can be an educational experience, actually, but it's not very life-giving, you know? No, you as in the ayahuasca communities, they say, what do you do if you see the great giant anaconda? You dive into his mouth and look out through his eyes. You become the Shakti, the Kundalini. It's yours, you know? Why run from it, you know? If there's a monster, a boogeyman, a dragon, you just dive into the pupil of the eye, okay? But it helps to have been told that by your therapist on the day before. And it still may be scary to do, but at least you have an intention. This feeling, this is my mind. I have a right to know what's going on in it. And if something comes to me, it probably comes to teach me something. And it might be a difficult lesson, but I want to learn what's going on here, you know? So confronting, embracing, diving in, being open, being curious is critical as far as the intention when you take a psychedelic. And the second big principle is to turn off the chattering, rational mind with its big vocabulary that wants to say, stop the world, I got to figure out what's going on here. I got to label it. Where is this coming from? Blah, 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 blah. No, that's called intellectualization. That's a defense mechanism. No, collect experiences. And at the end of the day, you can take your knowledge of depth psychology and quantum physics and comparative religion and whatever you want and decide what words to put on the experience. But when it's happening, be the piece of driftwood being carried by the current of the river, okay? But you need to be told that in advance. And the third important thing is psychosomatic manifestations, nausea, tremors, whatever. They're not nasty side effects. They usually have meaning. And if you feel nausea, you dive into your stomach as fast as you can. You explore it. If you feel a tremor, you imagine a little, maybe a tunnel from your forehead to the sensation and see what comes to mind. Maybe there's a memory waking up there that's being expressed in that tremor or whatever. But you kind of value the body, and at times you may forget that you even have a body. And other times the body may be very expressive and active, and you may even be doing mudras and conducting the symphony, you know, which is fine, you know. Whoa. The art of the therapist is intuitively sensing to some degree, with some degree of probability of accuracy, what state of consciousness the body on the couch is in. You know, the body looks the same throughout the day, but it can be a newborn child. It can be a rebellious adolescent. It can be a enlightened master. Okay? There can be an ego to talk to. There can be states of consciousness where there's no ego to speak to. And if you say, tell me where you are, you may be asking the person to fight the experience in order to activate the vocal apparatus and access the language centers to be able to talk to you. Poor timing, you know? No, we'll talk later, you know? If you need support, I'm right here. I'll give it to you, strong. And there's also, while we're at it, I'm a great campaigner for good touch, okay? You know, we are so phobic, and, you know, psychiatrists debate whether it's proper to shake the hand of the patient when he comes in. There are times where the warmth of a hand provides incredibly helpful grounding in a psychedelic experience. And a person can always say, I'm fine, I don't need it. But sometimes people need it and they can't ask for it, okay? And so you have to trust your intuition and build on a good relationship, you know? You don't make a contract, you know, how do you want to be touched? And I won't touch you unless you ask for it. In some states of consciousness, that won't work, you know? If a child is lying on the floor screaming, we do not say, would you like to be picked up, right? We intuitively pick up the child. And there are moments like that in some psychedelic sessions. So we got to trust our therapists. And we can videotape sessions and all to make the lawyers happy if they're afraid that something sexual might go on, you know? But there's good non-sexual touch that goes with very effective therapy with many people. And I think we need to defend that. Yeah. End of sermon.
Yeah, I hear, you know, really strong themes of the relationship, the relational, and then what may feel counterintuitive to a lot of people, just leaning into the discomfort, right? So, yeah.
I mean, there is potential for abuse. There's also potential in lawyers' offices and counseling with your professor in graduate school and on and on and on, you know? It's not that it's impossible, but most therapists are pretty well put together. And especially if they're part of a community and they debrief what's going on and share their therapeutic experiences, it's pretty safe, I think.
Yeah, that to me is one of the big reasons I want above ground practice where there are these accountability systems and licensing boards and things like that, so that if things do go wrong, there's accountability for it, right?
Yeah.
There's a phrase that picked up from you that we use a lot, which is trust, let go, and be open. And
ELO, yeah.
Yeah.
That's worked for decades with an awful lot of people. Trust, let go, be open. And people can repeat that mantra to themselves silently. You know, if they get a little scared and they say, what should I do now? They can say to themselves, trust, let go, be open, TLO. There's other good ones too, but that works well with a lot of people.
Let's see. So probably the big area that I haven't asked you about much yet is if you'd like to talk a little bit about your palliative care research and work.
Oh, I would love to talk about that.
Yeah.
I kind of say facetiously, well, that's only relevant to people who are mortal, So, we have such denial of death still in our culture. We still have red lights shining on corpses in expensive caskets, trying to make them look as lifelike as possible. Yeah, it's kind of weird. I remember one of my early wills. I had this line: "I have no objection to looking dead when I'm dead." It's quite all right. No, but where I'm focusing my own limited energies right now, after working in addictions and depression and training of medical and religious leaders and so on. My main focus is on people at the end of life, generally cancer patients, at Sunstone Therapies in Rockville, Maryland now. Briefly, one of the projects we're doing right now and the direction we're moving is preparing and integrating in groups of 4 with a combination of individual and group therapy. And then the 4 cancer patients have their psilocybin sessions in 4 different rooms with individual therapists at the same time on one day. And then they all get together and debrief the next day together and so on. And I can't tell you well, I will tell you, I am telling you how incredibly meaningful and joyful this work is. How people really snap out of their depression and their anxiety, and they live until they die, instead of hiding in their bedrooms with the curtains drawn, waiting for the next dose of morphine, not wanting anyone to see me this way, kind of thing. People come alive. They value their friendships. And when there's pain, many will say the pain is still there, but it doesn't bother me like before, because the fear is gone. And in the center of consciousness now, there are relationships and new challenges and tasks and things they want to do. And many of these people, this is just an anecdotal observation at this point, but many of these people are living much longer than they were expected to. And I wonder to what extent that will to live and freedom from depression really helps the immune system work more effectively, But we have a follow-up group of people who were in the study, some of them 4 years ago. They finished their research, but they still get together once a month just to support each other, And they look forward to it. And I look forward to being with that group,
We had a follow-up question there from Christine about whether the preparation and integration with groups of 4 is much different than doing it individually.
Yes, I am very impressed with the group dimension. The individually works fine, and I've done a lot of individual work with cancer patients with LSD and DPT and psilocybin. Um, but this group being in this together, and all of a sudden the cancer isn't a big deal. You know, Yeah, of course we got cancer. Lots of people have cancer. And some people have heart disease instead, but what the heck, Okay, we're living with cancer, but they're living with cancer, And it's my hope and the hope of Sunstone Therapies is that within a few years, this will become part of the mental health offerings of oncology centers throughout the country and perhaps the world, that it will be normalized and psilocybin therapy will be accessible and helpful to a lot of people. We also have just done a project, or we're still doing it. Actually, this one is with MDMA, where we give it both to the cancer patient and a close family member in 2 sessions. The first with separate therapists in separate rooms, and the second time with all four in the same room. And good things are happening there too. So it begins to pave the way for giving MDMA to normal, healthy people to help them in their grief work, and open up communication. Why not?
And we had so go ahead. Yeah.
There's all kinds of other wonderful studies that have never been designed. Maybe some of you can design them,
Amy asked where we can learn more about palliative care with psychedelics. Are there any things you would point people to?
No, not everyone has a profound transcendental experience the first time. Some deal with very ordinary psychodynamic issues, but everyone really values it in retrospect, I think, even if it's difficult. So we prepare people to welcome whatever they discover themselves experiencing, not to judge it, but to trust the wisdom of your own mind and let that be the agenda of the day. And actually, in a 6-hour psilocybin session, sometimes there are a number of very different experiences that can happen in the same day, but you greet each one as it comes to you.
I want to check in with Phil Marie here to see how are we doing with questions, Phil Marie.
Yeah,
do we have a lot? Should we go to that now, or how are you doing with them?
I wouldn't say a lot. There's like 4 questions so far.
Okay. So we could keep going a little bit more with palliative care if you like then, or we could open up to questions if people have them. How about if we I'd like to get some voices in the room here. Phil Marie, are there ones that you'd like to start us with, and then maybe we could open it up to some questions?
Sure. Let's see here. Trying to decide which one to start with. Well, we've talked about training a little bit, but this question is about training. If you were starting, so like right now, out as a psychedelic therapist today, how would you proceed? How would you train? Where would you focus your energy? What skills would you most want to develop?
Yeah, who makes a good psychedelic therapist? it's an interesting experience. Those who do it love it. Some people try it and decide it's not for them, that they'd rather do psychological testing, and that's okay, you know? But with many people, it involves essentially sitting quietly for several hours, meditating yourself, being centered, not playing with your iPhone, but really being present, especially in the first hour and a half, 2 hours or so. Whether there's conversation or not, whether you're needed or not, there's a sense of connectedness. You're not so important you have to be on call. You're fully present for that person. And that gives a sense of grounding, stability. And if the person has been silent for quite a while, you might say, would you like to describe where you find yourself? But it's always an invitation. It's never a demand. And if you've told the person in preparation, if you hear my voice, say that or something like that, and you just sense this isn't a good time to try to talk, just ignore me, okay? And I'll check in with you again 15 minutes later, okay? If someone starts to panic, you may provide very directive, strong support. You're much more than a sitter, you provide grounding, you provide presence, patience, and sometimes very directive, in and through, we're with you, you're doing fine, keep going, when someone starts peeking out under the eye shade, they're scared, okay? Are you really there? What's going on here? Yeah. So you provide whatever support is indicated. But it can be a long day. It's 5, 6 hours. And some beginning therapists feel guilty about that. Like if I'm being paid, I should be doing something, But sometimes doing nothing is exactly what's needed. And you've done your somethings in the preparation, and you'll do it in the integration, and maybe at the end of the day. But you don't have to be chattering during the period of onset of drug effects, So you trust your experience and your intuition with each person.
Yeah, thank you for that. Okay, let's see. Trying to decide which one. All right. Can you talk about the role you feel human evolution must play in order for wider acceptance of MDMA in light of the recent FDA decision against approval? So the role human evolution has to play for acceptance of MDMA.
Well, we have to understand that MDMA and psilocybin and ibogaine and whatever comes down the pike here are not simple molecules that cause defined effects. These are triggers that expand, open up states of consciousness that have always been there and are within us right now, but we've forgotten about them. We've lost touch with them. So I think we need some perspectives from philosophy and religion and so on, as well as psychopharmacology, to begin to competently deal with integrating psychedelics into our culture.
Yeah.
They're one of the most profound mystical insights, and it sounds so poetic, is that the ultimate source of energy in the vortex of the human mind is an energy called love. You may know Dante at the end of the Divine Comedy says, "It is love that moves the sun and other stars." I think he was probably writing out of his own mystical experiences. Whether he munched mushrooms or not, I have no idea, you know. But this insight of love as a creative, transformative energy in the depths of the psyche needs to be really taken seriously. It sounds so poetic, but boy, it's powerful, it's creative, it's transformative, and it enables people to forgive themselves and forgive other people and to rebuild lives that have been broken. It's not just mushy religious stuff, you know. This is very, very potent. Another profound insight of mystical states is this so-called, in Hinduism, Netavindra, but this concept that within the unit of consciousness, we really are all interconnected. Call it the unity of humankind. Before the women's movement, we called it the brotherhood of man. You know, that term has to go. But that within consciousness, we really are potentially brothers and sisters and interconnected and belonging. That's pretty profound. And that has a lot of implications for mental health and for religion. So, William James called this the noetic qualities of spiritual experiences. And I suspect some people on the FDA committee may not have read Rudolf Otto's The Idea of the Holy, that within us there is the rational, and we're capable of being irrational. But there also is a human capacity that he called non-rational or intuitive, of beholding truth, recognizing truth. And when different people report the same things, I think there's some reliability there, even though it is subjective, you can't see it, you can't measure it, except in subsequent behavior, But I think we need to take that seriously. Intuition is more than a woman's hunch, with all due respect to women's hunches. But it's a real way of awakening spiritually. And we've been a very cognitive, rational culture, especially in academia.
Yeah, thank you. There was a couple of questions I had to do with your experience in palliative care, and the families, caregivers involved, in sessions where the person nearing end of life connects with those family members before passing? Are there any stories that stand out for you? Any support sessions, journeys, things like that for spouses, families that you're familiar with?
Oh, I can tell many. One of the stories in my book that some of you may have read, uh, it comes to mind right off, is of this woman who was um, very depressed with advancing cancer. And her mother-in-law would visit her just before her bridge game every day so she could say she had looked in on her daughter-in-law. And it was just very phony. And her husband took her to a Caribbean island to get her mind off the cancer without telling her her diagnosis. And she was miserable in the Caribbean and finally broke through his denial and was just very angry. And she sent her two kids off to summer camp, hoping to be dead before they returned. You know? Okay, this woman, another footnote with her, she had read this book by Sidney Cohen, The Beyond Within, about how some people under LSD experience Van Gogh-like transformations in perception. And she was a fairly wealthy woman, and she had some very valuable works of art that she had brought into her private hospital room to look at under LSD. Well, her LSD session proved to be just hours of uncontrolled sobbing and anger and going through very painful feelings of loneliness. But it completely wiped out her depression. And at the end of the day, as her family timidly came in and assembled around her hospital bed, her mother-in-law reached over to give her a kiss, and the patient grabbed the mother-in-law's wig, snatched it off, and then sat up regally in bed and said, "Let's get a few things straight. It is true that I am dying. I can still hear her, but I am not dead yet." And you can imagine the family therapy that went on there, of laughing and working together. And then she brought her kids home from summer camps one at a time and prepared them personally for her death. She gave away her jewelry to close friends one at a time. "I want you to have this. I want you to have this." She really enjoyed, if I dare say, the terminal months of her illness. And interestingly enough, this particular woman, concept of death was a light bulb going out. And she did not expect immortality of any kind. And I respect whatever people's belief systems are. And I was with her just as she was going into coma in the hospital, with her sister also present. And I asked her if she still thought death would be like a light bulb going out. And she looked me straight in the eye and she said, "Yep." But then she paused and she said, "But I'm willing to be surprised." And then she went into coma and died, with her sister holding her hand, But, that's just one of probably a couple hundred stories I could tell you. it's awesome work. And if you feel called to it, go for it. Yeah. I think one source of psychedelic therapists in this field, especially with palliative care, may be chaplains and pastoral counselors, that already aren't afraid of death and aren't afraid of holding the hand of someone who's dying, and have some religious orientation that enables them to enter the hospital. But what if this becomes normative? I find that pretty hopeful. And in Canada, especially, and Australia, they're farther ahead than we are.
Beautiful story. Thank you for
You're
sharing.
welcome.
We have a couple minutes left, and there's a couple of questions, and I can imagine the answers could be much longer than the time we have, but I'll share at least one, and we'll see how it goes.
Okay.
Any advice for letting go, especially when trust in the universe is tricky?
Yeah. Some people find it very easy to trust. Some people find it extremely difficult. I like to stress that it is choosing to trust. It's not just being passive. Okay. Being passive is like lying on the pavement when a steamroller is coming, It's not a good idea. But it's choosing to trust with these people in this situation, with what I know about the purity and the dosage of this substance, with what the preparation I've been given, with perhaps other people I've talked to who have claimed benefit. I choose to dive off the high dive when I don't know the temperature or the depth of the water. But I know others have done it and they said it was helpful. And I trust that my guide is a good lifeguard, But it's a choice. No one's going to push you off the diving board, okay? You choose to trust.
Thank you. Okay, I'm gonna shoot for one more question. And then
Okay,
we're
I'm
almost at time.
lead the way.
All right. So I know you've studied music for a number of years, piano in particular. And you've said in interviews that when I grow up, I'm going to be a musician. Can you share a little bit about how music has personally informed or contributed to sort of this path that you've taken? And maybe a couple of tips you might have for curating psychedelic playlists.
Oh, wow. I'm glad we have another hour. um, there, yeah, as you may know, I've made several playlists. One that's known as the Hopkins playlist. Actually, we used at the Maryland Psychiatric Research Center, and it gets uh, edited a little bit here and there and changes over time. But it's a playlist that has worked with a lot of different people for many years. It's kind of passed the test of time. I've come to believe in high dose sessions, especially at onset and peak periods, that what matters is the structure of the sound itself. It's not the favorite everyday choices of either the therapist or the patient. It's a language. It's it it doesn't cause content but it provides supportive structure. It's sort of like the net of a trapeze artist. If you don't need it, you forget that it's there. But if you need it, it's immediately there. And it ensures safety and helps you move through challenging terrain if it comes up in your session. Sometimes in the height of sessions, people don't even hear the music anymore, or they become the music, or they feel like they're getting into the mind of the composer or whatever, And here, talk about educational applications. Let's not only give this to depressed patients, let's give it to quantum physicists and composers, okay? And see what they do with this knowledge, how they integrate it, what new insights come to them. I think some of the great composers and conductors probably spontaneously had mystical states of awareness. That Stokowski, when he was conducting, sometimes was, I think, dancing in a transcendental state, but yeah. And there are many forms of music that can be helpful. It doesn't have to be all Western classical. Some Western classical would be terrible. But things like Samuel Barber's Adagio for strings, the ninth Enigma variation of Sir Edward Elgar, Nimrod, the second movement of the Brahms Violin Concerto or the Mozart Clarinet Concerto, the Transfiguration section, which is tricky because you have to start halfway through, of Richard Strauss's Death and Transfiguration, can be very helpful to many people, and so on. But also judiciously used Indian ragas. I have nothing against a simple triangle chime or a gong or one of the more new agey instruments, when one is already in a transcendental state. But to start off with that, I think many people, especially in their first sessions, need more definitive structure and support. And some of the ambient music, to me, feels like just kind of wandering aimlessly in the meadow. It's not picking you up and helping you go deeper than you otherwise would. So music is very important. And there's a lot we don't know yet. But it's much more than personal preferences, I'm convinced. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. I'm just going to show the whole room here. So thanks so much for being with us today and giving us your time and your wisdom. Always enjoy it. Even the ideas that I've heard before, take on a freshness. Just really great every time I'm with you.
Thanks to all of you for your interest and your support of Jeff here and all the wonderful things that are happening in Chicago. I think I'm going to be there for a weekend in a couple of weeks. I haven't been in Chicago for a long time. So.
Oh, you got to let us know if you want to visit us.
I lived there one summer, actually, a long time ago. Yeah. Well, take care, everyone.
All right.
So much. Take care.
Thanks, Noel.